You know, folks, I got about 13 and a half minutes to do this. So, I thought I'd kind of give you my thoughts on Survivor Series. I know the Off the Rope show is doing their review on Survivor Series by reviewing every single Survivor Series there is, but I thought maybe I'd try to talk about some of them here in this video. Now, first of all, let me say this. I really didn't know much about Survivor Series when it first started. I really got introduced to it mostly during '89 and '90. But I will say this: Survivor Series, and I think I speak for a lot of fans out there, is one of my personal favorites because because the reason it's one of my personal favorites because it's one of the times where you get a lot of superstars back in the day, and I guess at times nowadays. But it's one of those rare times where you get a lot of the wrestlers and even the divas that you normally wouldn't see on a pay-per-view. Now, when I first saw the first two Survivor Series on VHS, I have to say that you got to see exactly what I'm talking about. You got to see superstars and even tag teams and women wrestlers that you wouldn't normally see on a pay-per-view. I mean, take for example that big tag team elimination match, and I mean the 12 tag team match, that 12 tag team elimination match, 5 tag teams on each side. I mean, you saw teams like the Killer Bees, you saw the Young Stallions. Those were teams you normally wouldn't see on a pay-per-view. You saw the Conquistadors, things like that. Again, you normally wouldn't see these guys on a pay-per-view. Back then, or even today, if they continued that concept. But the thing is, you never saw that, and that was always the thing that and I'm pretty sure a lot of people liked about Survivor Series. You got to see people normally you wouldn't see on a pay-per-view. For example, one of the first women elimination match, I don't know, the first women elimination match was in '87 or '88, whichever one, but you got to see women wrestlers there that normally you wouldn't have seen on a pay-per-view at all. You would have, like Dawn Marie, not the Dawn Marie we know from ECW, but another Dawn Marie, Donnie Costello. You saw Rockin' Robin. You saw, all these women. You saw all these women, and I apologize, that's a motorcycle in the background. But you saw all these women wrestlers that normally you wouldn't see on a pay-per-view. Now, WWE does still try to continue that at times, but it's not as good as it was before, but they still try to continue it. I mean, they did it with Alonzo Blaze and Bull Nakano, but the thing is, they had to get women from all Japan to come wrestle with them. And that was always, like I said, the uniqueness about that. And then, of course, you had the other Survivor Series matches. You had guys like Ken Patera that you normally wouldn't see on a pay-per-view that much. Ron Bass, the list goes on. Butch Reed. Again, the list just goes on of guys that normally you really wouldn't see on a pay-per-view that much, even today. And the one thing that always stood out to me too was you had guys on teams that were a part of Survivor Series teams that you never heard of unless you now go back and look at the archives that WWE has in the library, in the video library, and you take a look at the WCCW archives, most importantly, and you see guys like Sam Houston and Scott Casey, and you think to yourself, well, who the heck are these guys? I never heard of them. Because that's what I thought when I first saw, I think, Sam Houston on Warriors team in '88, and I think Scott Casey on another team. I'm thinking, I've never heard of these guys. I don't know who they are. I never heard of them. But that was the uniqueness. Again, that was the uniqueness of Survivor Series. You got to see guys normally you wouldn't have heard of that much of. And I'm thinking this was at a time when WWE would sign these guys to maybe a few months, 5 months or something like that. Most importantly, they would sign them so they could be part of something like Survivor Series. That's my thought. But again, this was something you normally wouldn't see these guys. And then what makes it even one of my personal favorites is you would always have unique concepts sometimes thrown in. You would have every year you'd have unique concepts. Sometimes you'd have certain Survivor Series pay-per-views being experimented on with different with different formats. Like 1990, they had the grand finale. That was basically taking the surviving babyfaces, the babyfaces that survived their matches, against the heels that survived theirs, which was an interesting concept there. And quite frankly, I wish they would bring that back. And then the following year, they finally did something that, normally you wouldn't think they would do at a Survivor Series. They had a championship match in the middle of the card, which was the WWE Championship between The Undertaker and Hogan, as well as they had the first ever, and as far as I know, only 6-man elimination tag team match at Survivor Series, which originally was supposed to be a traditional one, but because of what happened to Justice and the whole Savage Roberts deal, didn't occur. Then the following year, they experimented with a new format by only having one Survivor Series match with the Disasters and the Nasty Boys against the Beverlys and Money Inc., and everything else was one-on-one or a traditional tag match. And in '93 they went back in. In '93 they used the same format they used 2 years before, but the championship match that was in the middle of the card was for another promotion's championship. It was for the Smoky Mountain Tag Team Championship, which, believe it or not, is not the first time in '93 that occurred. In fact, earlier that year in '93, around February, Smoky Mountain, in a deal they had with WCW, had a championship match at Super Brawl. So basically, Smoky Mountain, even though a small regional wrestling promotion, made history by being the only wrestling promotion, regional or independent or whatever, to cross-promote with 2 different major organizations, as well as have their championships on the line. And then, the following year, I think they went back to the traditional Survivor Series deal. Then in '95, they had the wild card concept for one of the matches, which was pretty cool. '96, they had like 3 individual matches and a few Survivor Series. '97, they had some, it's just, I didn't really pay much attention as we got into the late '90s, but like I said, '97 was a year. Of course, we all know what that one was. '97, of course, was the Montreal Screwjob, Goldust walking out on Team America, Team USA, things like that. And then '98 was the single elimination tournament for the title, which Rock won. Then '99 was the whole thing that happened to Stone Cold and Big Show winning the title. Then we had Survivor Series the following year, which was Rock, Rikishi, Austin, Triple H. Then of course we had the Alliance deal, and then things started to kind of go back and forth, kind of like a mixture where you would have elimination matches, then you would have one-on-one matches, stuff like that. So it's really, really interesting. And I think the only one so far in the past decade that was more traditional in a way was indeed between, I believe, 2004 and 2007, 2008, something like that. Because every now and then you would have a Survivor Series, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 Survivor Series matches, and that's it. Maybe 2 at least. But sometimes if you only had 1, that would be your main event. So nowadays, that is. So overall, to me, Survivor Series is one of my favorites because when it first began, you got to see superstars and divas, or women wrestlers slash divas, that you normally wouldn't see on a pay-per-view get showcased, as well as they always would try different unique concepts, like put a championship match for the WWE title in the middle, like they did in '91, or put a championship match for another promotion's championship in the middle, do single elimination. It's just uniqueness, the wild card team concept, things like that, all made it a personal favorite of mine, and everybody else's. And then the rumor going on for this year's is they're going to have different match varieties, different variety of matches, not just the Survivor Series, but different matches like the Scramble and something else that'll be rumored around. So, but overall, Survivor Series to me is one of my personal favorites, and just for the exact reasons that I mentioned. And that's all I really want to say. If you guys have your own thoughts on why it's your favorite, comment down below. Tell me what you guys think. And really, that's all I'm going to say. If I missed out on anything that was made Survivor Series unique throughout its history so far, let me know, and I'll talk to you all later.